That's
Yeah.
that was fancy. That was fancy.
Yeah.
Here I was,
It
it's like I was meditating to the audio loop, and then this fancy graphic comes out. It's a little bit, it's maybe raises the expectations for what I'm gonna see here.
I did mess up the transition though. It's because like I have a template, but I guess I didn't update our stream. I updated it after, but it's not supposed to show us in that little like fancy animation. So we were both there. But anyways,
Yeah, I saw
it's
that,
all
I
good.
saw that, like, that's okay. It got my reaction like, "Wow, fancy."
The beauty of live streaming. Hey everybody, my name's Nick Taylor, and I'm a developer advocate at Pomerium, and we're back on the Pomerium live stream. And today I'm hanging out with my friend Brian Rinaldi. Brian, how you doing today?
I am doing really well, thanks.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah, I'm excited to chat with you today. I haven't done much in AWS myself, and we're going to talk about a product where you're heading DevRel over at a place called LocalStack. So, but before we get into that, I guess like maybe if you want to say a bit about yourself, I know you get up to a lot of things because I'm actually part of some of the other things you do. But
Yeah.
yeah, maybe a brief intro of who you are and what you get up to.
Yeah, yeah, I'm Brian. I'm currently in Orlando. I'm actually in the process of moving back to Boston.
Oh, okay,
But
yeah,
I've been in
cool.
Orlando for a while. I as you said, I lead the DevRel team at LocalStack. I also I run up something called CFE.dev, which has a show by somebody named Nick Taylor called Two Full Two Stack. So we've got like lots of live events, all free. I've been running that now for, it's going to be almost 8 years. I've been running that. And let's see, I've been a developer for like 25 plus years.
Mhm.
Um, I've been in DevRel for about 15 of those. So I've been doing this a while.
Yeah,
um,
exactly.
yeah, and I also like as you said, I'm really involved in the community besides the CFE.dev stuff. Up until now that I'm leaving, end of this month, basically, it's my end of running the Orlando Devs group, which I've been doing for about 7.5 years as well. Those are
Mhm.
like in-person events here in Orlando. Obviously, the group's not going anywhere, but I am.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah, for sure.
yeah.
Yeah,
So, I just, that's kind of how I got into DevRel in the first place is I loved doing all this stuff. I was running conferences, running user groups and meetups and
yeah,
writing articles and speaking. And I was just like, well, what if I could turn this into a job? Um,
yeah. No,
so
that's super cool. Yeah, it's kind of funny. I mean, we're not really talking about DevRel today, but we go on tangents obviously sometimes. But
yeah,
it's I feel like DevRel is kind of gone back to what it used to be potentially to some degree. Like it's more like I don't know, like the way I got into it is like people always thought I was doing DevRel, but I was full-time engineering. I just happened to live stream or blog or give a talk and stuff. And that's kind of how like DevRel kind of became a thing where it's like engineers just started doing those things. And it's like uh I don't know, at least I feel like there's all kinds of things going on in DevRel right now, but it's
yeah. We could have
I
a
don't
whole
know.
stream talking about that. Yeah. In fact, we
Yeah,
do
yeah.
eat that dev. Have a whole
Yeah,
stream we talk about DevRel.
yeah,
But
yeah,
yeah,
DevRelish.
there's a
I'll drop a
lot.
link to that.
Yeah, there's a lot going on right now well, I mean, look, it's not just DevRel, it's like affecting everybody in tech right now. Like, um,
Yeah, totally.
just it's been layoffs for now. We're going like what, a year and a half of like seemingly endless layoffs, and that's impacted DevRel, I'd say, as much or more than any other um area.
Yeah,
Um,
totally.
so it's not. you know, I appreciate that it's not an easy time for anybody in
Yeah,
tech right now. And most of the people like, who are workers in tech are either, even if they have a job, the jobs have often gotten harder. So
Yeah, no, it's definitely interesting times. And of course, I derailed our stream like I usually do and take people on tangents.
Yeah,
But
that's fun, right? Like, yeah.
oh yeah, no, it's
It would be
life is a bunch of things.
yeah, right. Otherwise, what's that's what the live stream's about, right? Like,
Oh
the
yeah,
tangents are
totally.
part of the fun.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah, definitely love them. Um, I will be happy to go on many other tangents later, but I think we should probably at least start talking about something called LocalStack. So this is
Yeah.
where you're at. I'm gonna go ahead and drop a link to it where people can just go check that out if they want. So um, I've heard of LocalStack. I've never used it. I haven't really, to be honest. My experience with AWS is literally like I've deployed an EC2 instance. That's pretty much about it. Like, so I'm like very green in that space. Not intimidated necessarily. It's just I haven't had to do it because of different roles I've had. But I guess what is local stack in the
Yeah.
context of AWS, or what is local stack period?
Yeah. So you were probably doing it, right? Like you were deploying to AWS ultimately on in Netlify, for
Well,
instance.
yeah.
Under the covers, it was all AWS. They just abstracted out all the hard parts of
Yeah.
deploying there, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So local stack's been around for quite some time. Like it started as an open source project.
Okay.
Um, and if you've done, any degree of like cloud development, like a lot of times the difficulty is being able to actually build and test without having to say like, okay, I work on something, I push it out to the cloud, I wait for that deployment to finish, and then I test it, and then it's
Yeah.
like, oh, that didn't work, so I kind of keep doing that loop, and that was some of the difficulty that the founders were facing was just how do we build these we're building these micro what do you call it, microservice architectures and serverless apps and stuff like that. But you weren't able to actually easily build and test that locally. You were often like
Yeah.
building, deploying, testing, build, deploy, test is like was the cycle, which was
Yeah.
very could be very slow. Um, so they started building this emulator, which I mean, I'll be honest, I hadn't heard of it really that much before I joined, and when I read about it, I was like, that's insane. If you know AWS, it's like, oh, come on. Like, how can you emulate AWS? AWS is
Yeah.
like got a billion different services. But they did do that. And eventually the project became so popular that they basically decided to form a business around it. So
Okay.
they could properly, kind of build the stuff that people needed. Because as you might imagine, it's a massive undertaking. Doing this as like a side for free open source project would have
Oh yeah,
been.
definitely, no doubt.
So currently, we still have our open source version. It covers about 30 plus AWS services, things like Lambda, Dynamo, uh, uh, let's see, API Gateway, S3,
Okay.
things like a lot of the services that if you were building your serverless app, you'd probably or the ones
Yeah.
you'd use are covered there. And then we do obviously have a paid version, which includes and not only includes like a ton more services, so we'll get up to like 110, I think, or so
Okay.
services covered. And it also includes like things like chaos engineering, if you know what that is,
Yeah, I've
or
been at a couple SRE conferences recently, and
yeah,
I'd heard about it before too. But
yeah,
okay, yeah, so that's pretty neat that that's in there
yeah.
too.
Yeah, and all kinds of other like there's there you can integrate it. One of the nice things, and one of the I find the biggest benefits is not even just like for developers who want to develop locally,
Hmm.
but if for people who have integration tests in their automation, their CI/CD, it's
Yeah.
like some of these tests are super super slow, and it's
Oh
like
yeah.
yeah, it's a huge burden for the team, like to wait on like a 45-minute test to run, because those tests will like spin up an environment in the AWS, like deploy all the stuff, populate all the data that it needs to run the integration test, run the integration test. Okay, did it tasks, or and I've even
Yeah.
never mind that it takes 45 minutes. A lot of people I've talked to say, oh, it not only takes 45 minutes, but it sometimes randomly just fails
Guys.
because
Yeah.
something didn't finish, and it fails, and then
Okay.
it stops our whole process. So like in this case, you can just replace that AWS deployment and run your integration test against local stack,
Yeah.
and it takes just minutes, a few minutes, like 5
Okay.
minutes, let's say. Take it. Yeah.
A-
So
and so so local stacks and emulators. So is I guess like in general terms, they've basically respected all the contracts or like APIs of literally all the services and
correct.
have literally emulated them where it makes sense, I guess, and maybe in some cases mock certain things potentially or
Yeah, so in most cases, like most of the services are fully
yeah.
emulated. So
Okay.
so they actually do like run. Our goal is to run as identically as we can to AWS. So that um we even have like worked closely with teams at AWS on occasion to like actually work towards making sure we're emulating those
Okay.
as best we can. But that is the goal. So the API should run the same, even to
Hmm.
the point of like we try our best to make sure even the errors that you get back are the same.
Okay.
Because in some cases, people have like particularly automations that will, look for particular errors and then trigger something.
Yeah.
Um, so we try to be as close to the actual thing. Some services are we will label them as crud, but that just means they're basically mocked.
Okay.
So not everything, and it's not like if you go through like some things, like for instance Lambda
Hmm.
and S3, you'll go through the list of like all the different APIs, and you'll see
Okay.
we cover almost every single one. And then other services, it's much less so, right? Like
Okay.
we don't have full API coverage on every single service.
Okay.
Um, yeah. But we
Yeah.
try to make sure that at least the most used services are as complete as possible, and
Hmm.
the other services I like have coverage for the most used APIs.
Okay.
Um, and then yeah,
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And I guess if there's demand to have like more exposure on those APIs, that like obviously like there's a demand for that. Um,
yeah, yeah.
yeah,
If you pay us, we'll build it.
yeah, exactly.
I'm kidding. It's a little bit of a joke, but obviously, like if we have, we have built services for like, a big enterprise customer that says like, we'll sign this contract, and but we
Yeah,
need this particular thing supported, and
yeah,
that
it's a good
happens.
incentive. That's kind of
Yeah,
nice though, because like obviously you fulfill that user or client's need, but the rest of your clients
yeah,
potentially benefit from that. So that's cool. So,
yeah,
yeah.
exactly, exactly. So
Okay. Okay.
and I feel like it probably fits in a lot with the stuff you're doing. I mean, because obviously these, you have all these connections here, like all these different services, and
Yeah.
not everybody's, gonna have, you need to add a layer of security onto a lot of these pieces, which is one of the considerations when you choose. Like one of the nice things about local stack is I can give a developer access
Yeah.
to develop on using local stack, right? And they have access to all the services, but I don't actually have to give them an AWS account
Okay,
in
that's
theory,
so that's super
right?
nice too. Yeah, so
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
And I guess in terms of setup, like how does it work exactly? Is it like I don't know, like let's say we have a repo where we're working on our project. Do I pull down our actual project and there's like dependencies for local stack in there to run, or is it like a cloud environment where you run like I know it sounds
It's
funny to
yeah,
say you're testing the cloud in a cloud environment, but like obviously more centralized,
yeah.
not centralized, but emulated. Sorry.
You say that, but we have ephemeral environments, which I jokingly said was like, okay, so I'm emulating the cloud and then putting it back in the cloud, like,
Yeah.
like anyway, I'm like, kind of goes full circle. But
Yeah.
but yeah, so So it runs inside a container. So it can really run
Okay.
inside any kind of container, but usually, like on your local laptop, it'd be like Docker or something, some
Okay.
other Docker alternative. So that's how it runs. Uh, you don't have to specify any kind of dependency. The goal is you for the most part you should not have to change anything in your code
Okay.
to be able to use local stack. The idea is you deploy to local stack basically the exact same way you would deploy to AWS.
Okay.
We also have Snowflake, by the way, which is but I
The-
don't ask me a lot of questions about Snowflake. I'm over
okay.
it. But we
You're
do have
talking
a
about
Snowflake
the
emulator.
database, you're talking about?
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah. We have a Snowflake emulator. So you use the same tools like if you use Terraform or CDK or CloudFormation or Pulumi,
Okay.
use that to deploy. And in the basically the difference is you point it at local stack. We have like
Okay,
little
yeah.
lightweight wrappers around like some of the things like the AWS CLI and the AWS the CDK, and etc. Um, that allows you to say to not even have to kind of manually point it.
Okay.
You just use like, oh, okay, CDK local instead of CDK, and CDK local knows pointed at local stack.
Okay.
Um, and then the nice thing is we have something I think whether I forget the term they use, like transparent endpoint injection or something like that is what we call it. Which
Okay.
basically what that does, all that does is it says like within local stack. So like if your Lambda is calling out to a Dynamo,
Yeah.
it knows to point it at the one in local stack, not the
Okay, as
one,
opposed to
not
the
AWS.
yeah.
Yeah, so it
Yeah,
all
okay.
kind of stays contained within there. So yeah,
Okay.
so the nice thing is you take your deployment scripts, same deployment scripts, and you use those to deploy.
Okay.
You interact with it basically the same way you would interact with AWS. You don't have to change your any of your code on your anything else, and like your lambdas stay the same, etc. Right? Um,
Yeah.
it just
Okay.
deploys to your container, local
Yeah.
container.
Yeah, and I know we're gonna look at some demos soon, but I think that's really nice. One, because it's just like you're just treating it like any other environment, but also I definitely like the story in your CI/CD pipeline where you're running tests, where it's like, you know, the emulator makes more sense, because like yeah, integration tests or even end-to-end tests take forever in general. And
Yep.
so like having to not spin up that whole environment like you were saying in real time every time or whenever you do run them is probably a huge time saver like you were saying. I guess is there before we get into demos, is there like also a cost saving? Like obviously I know local stack has a like a paid product as well. We're
Yeah.
open core as well. Like obviously at the end of the day you do want to make some money. But like
Right.
I imagine I would assume that it's more beneficial than obviously paying for spinning up the real environment. Hopefully I'm not throwing
Right.
you under the bus here with
No,
that
no, not at
question.
all. Yeah. So yeah, yes, it is. I like to say like it is. You have to think about. I'm sorry, my desk is very. I'm in this temporary house, and like this desk is very like
Okay, we're
flimsy.
wobbly.
So I barely tap it, and it's like. Anyway, So yeah. There's two ways to think about the savings. Number one, you will save money ultimately, even if you're paying for it. Like
Mhm.
obviously, if you're using the open source version, but even if you're paying for it, you ultimately do save money. It's more
Yeah.
predictable, number one, because I know how because ours is like a seat based. You pay
Okay.
so it's predictable pricing. Whereas like when you create these environments, like oftentimes like the test ones, most of the time everything gets torn down well enough.
Yeah.
Sometimes those teardowns fail and you can leave stuff running. The
Okay.
biggest one is like developers tend to use in shared environments or even in their development environments tend to create resources, leave them on, and forget about them
Okay. Yeah.
more than the CI/CD testing. Um, so it's hard to like get exact quantify like how much would you save. It depends on what you're
Oh yeah.
using. Depends on a ton of factors. I like to think of it more about like yeah, you get this predictable. cost and probable savings, but
Yeah.
you also like that 45 minutes down to 5 minutes is, or the speed of which your developers can develop locally because they're
Yeah.
not having to push stuff out to the cloud and wait on deployments, right?
Yeah. That's
That's
time saved
that's
too, which is that's
yeah,
salary not being burnt. Yeah.
exactly. Do you
Yeah.
think your bigger cost savings is there? It's
Yeah.
just in not only that, but like it's cost savings plus the experience is better, right? Like because
Yeah.
your developers are going to be happier because they're just moving faster. So
No, yeah, totally. Cool, cool. Yeah, so I guess like this is probably a good time to if you wanted to go ahead and share your screen. I know you said you wanted to demo a few things here.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I think it
Yeah.
makes more sense when you see it
Yeah.
than when. Okay, so
All right, let
share.
me
I'm
just
assuming you can see my screen, right?
yeah, I'll bring it in here. Okay, there we go. Cool.
All right, so I'm actually looking at the web app here. This is I'll show you a little bit more about what the LocalStack web app does. Um, but I'm going to go ahead and I need to. So the way I'd started is just basically. Oh, sorry, my keyboard decided to shut down. There we go. So I just
Okay.
do LocalStack start.
Okay.
Okay. You can see like it's just going to spin up pretty quickly. Um,
Okay. Do you
so
mind
I
zooming in a couple? I don't know if you
yeah
can zoom in your terminal or the browser too when you have a chance. Yeah. Okay, that's
yeah.
great. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah. So it looks like, yeah, like a dummy, I cleared out my Docker cache and it's actually
Oh, so it's
pulling the
pulling
whole
everything
image.
down. Okay, yeah.
Yeah. So this would be like if you literally had just installed it, it's going to pull down the image. Hopefully my internet decides to do this very quickly. Um,
Well, there's
I
a
was trying
question
to
in the
clear out
chat
some
while
like
it's doing it.
old, yeah, yeah, yeah. What's the question? I can't
Ryan
see it while I'm,
asks, oh yeah, no worries. No, it's perfect to allow it to download. So Ryan's asking, it's interesting AWS doesn't provide similar tooling.
hmm.
I suppose the preferred solution is dev accounts.
So yes and no. I mean, I think AWS does provide some of these tools.
Okay.
Like they have some local testing tools. Like if for Lambda and some other stuff, they have SAM, which has SAM local.
Okay.
They have like step functions has step functions local, but they're very service specific. They're not
Okay.
everything. So it isn't like you can emulate the whole thing. And and look, I'm not gonna say anything here that like somebody from AWS wouldn't be like, yeah, yeah, that's true. Which is that AWS is really excellent at making basically the plumbing, right?
Yeah.
There's like it doesn't go down. It works exactly as it's supposed to. I mean, it's really really well done. The developer experience aspects, yeah,
Yeah.
that's not their strength. And even the way they're organized internally, I think is kind of not conducive to like necessarily building these kind of big complex tools across all their services. So,
Okay.
and yeah, that's all I'll say there.
Yeah.
They make
No,
great
that's fine.
products, but it's not necessarily not how the developer experience is not generally
Okay.
their
Yeah.
strength.
Yeah. Well, I
Okay,
can. Oh, you're
yeah,
up.
go,
Okay. Yeah.
go.
Do you mind zooming in the your VS Code a bit or cursor? Sorry. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay. Perfect.
a little bit. Is that good? Okay, that's I zoomed in a little bit more. I'm going to show first. I'm going to show a simple project that I did. So I have something like that. I project I say is AWS for front end devs, and like it might. I think you would appreciate it because you did work at like play at Netlify at one point, and you know kind of what's under the covers there. Um,
Yeah.
and if you've been at like if you were around Netlify from the early days, like I was, early days, it started as like, okay, we're just going to basically handle your deployment, your build for your static site, deploy
Okay.
that static site to S3, throw CloudFront in front of it, and just, so it's globally distributed and it did that for you. So I kind of walk you through like building what is effectively like step by step, a very, very, very simple, like, how would you recreate Netlify
Yeah.
early days Netlify here. So like you start with like just S3, okay, then you add and CloudFront in front of that S3 to like basically CloudFront is the CDN,
Hmm.
so and then then you're going to add a Lambda, so you have some kind of backend, and then you add API gateway, so it's like a full API, and then you have like DynamoDB, so it's actually pulling from database. So I'm not going to
Yeah.
run you through all the different pieces. I'm just going to
Yeah.
skip all the way to the end here, which is like
Okay.
just as I want to show. This is the DynamoDB stack. If any of you have ever done CDK, like CDK is a way of basically writing code like Vine's written in TypeScript that will create those resource sources for you, right? So like
Yeah.
CloudFormation is like the YAML version of Terraform. Used to writing YAML. Under the
Hmm.
cover, CDK actually converts down to CloudFormation and deploys just like CloudFormation, but you can write it all. Like, so this is here, I'm defining my S3 bucket.
Okay.
I'm giving some like grants for security stuff. I'm adding the CloudFront distribution in front of that, creating a DynamoDB table. I am actually putting some fake data into the DynamoDB table to make it simple.
Okay.
Lambda function is here, right? And the Lambda function is given access to the DynamoDB table. I'm adding API gateway in front of that Lambda function, right? Setting up my API gateway, like the API endpoints, which in this
Yeah.
case is just /hello, and then I am deploying a bunch of assets to my S3 bucket here, and then finally just outputting the end result, right?
Yeah.
So I'm going to go ahead and like just because just to show you the different. Typically, you would do like CDK bootstrap and then CDK deploy. So we have something called CDK local,
Okay.
which is basically just a lightweight wrapper around the CDK that
Yeah.
point so that it automatically does the pointing it at local stack for you, right?
Okay.
So I'm going to do CDK local bootstrap. So I'm going to bootstrap this everything that's here, which should just take a second. Um,
Okay. Cool.
so
Uh-huh.
Bootstrap basically gets all the resources ready. So like zips up the files, creates like the cloud, basic cloud formation templates and etc. It's like if you're used to Terraform, it's like what is it? Terraform
Dot apply.
the
Is that?
plan, the
Oh,
plan.
plan.
It's
Yeah.
like
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. So, and then I'm going to do CDK local deploy. Now, the thing I'm going to show you here is like if you've ever done, which I guess you haven't, but if you've ever had to deploy these assets, while this is a super, super simple site, I'm not going to get your hopes up. This is intentionally simple. Um, it has a lot of resources that can take a while, particularly like if you're used to deploying CloudFront,
Yeah.
since CloudFront's a CDN, right? It
Hmm.
takes actually quite a long time to deploy CloudFront because it has to wait for the entire distribution be created and distributed, et cetera, right? So
Okay.
here we're creating all of those pieces I just described to you, which is like the CloudFront, the Lambda, the DynamoDB, API gateway, et cetera,
Yeah.
all being done here on my local machine. But the idea is this would probably take, I don't even know how long it would take. It would take a long time. I would not
Okay.
have you sit here watching me do it if I was doing this to AWS
It'd
because
be.
it'd take a little while. I mean, not incredibly long, but it would take long enough, right?
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm going to go ahead and copy this URL here. I'm going to try and open it here in my browser just to show you that everything is. Whoops, did I copy this wrong? Front distribution. I just ran this is like literally before we got on here. Let's see.
Is it not showing?
Specify key does not exist. Oh, well, great.
That's
Great.
okay. This
Demo
is like
fail.
yeah,
Yeah.
this is like we talked about this before because when I was doing a live stream last week, there was some hiccups. But this is the beauty of live streaming
Yep.
is things aren't perfect. They're not meant to be perfect. So, uh, but I always find this interesting, anyways. And like I know people in the chat typically do because they're like, okay, well, what's the problem? What could it be? So you're saying
Yeah.
you ran your deploy before, so like that key should be there, obviously.
I ran this earlier, and it should have been there. This may have been me trying to clean things up to
Okay.
to be ready here, and I might have actually screwed something up in my setup here. I hope not, because I'd like to be able to show you this stuff actually running. I'm going to run through this once more because it only
Yeah,
takes a
yeah.
few minutes just to see if I restart the whole um, if I restart local stack and do that. I'm going to show you here. You can see local stacks running within my Docker desktop. You can see that I do have a
Okay.
container running with local stack. I know it's small. There's nothing
Yeah.
really to see here other than that it exists.
Yeah.
One of the nice things is that local stack will some things, like let's say you're running EKS or ECS, like even sometimes Lambda, like require a container, an additional container, and it will
Okay.
handle that for you. All right,
Okay.
so I clearly messed something up. Of course, I did. Let's see. I'm gonna go
That's
here and
okay.
see because I'm
We
gonna
can
show
debug it.
you. Yeah, we could. I'm going to show you, like, we can actually go here and see the resources that are running. So
Okay.
this is kind of like your AWS like resource browser. I'm going to go
Okay.
ahead and just show you. We're going to go to CloudFront and actually see
Okay.
if I can figure out why. Where
Okay.
is CloudFront?
And
Uh,
also, do you mind
Finding
zooming
it.
in a few times?
Yeah, yeah.
Just
There you go.
okay. All right,
Okay,
cool. So
so I'm gonna go ahead and find CloudFront. Where are you, CloudFront?
yeah, I don't see it either. I'm
Yeah.
assuming it's
Okay, I'm
in
gonna type it.
alphabetical order.
It's not really. No.
Oh, okay.
Cloud Trail, Cloud Formation, Cloud. Hmm,
Oh, it does. There it is.
it's here. Yeah, I don't know why I'm not seeing it in my resource browser here. Of course,
Is that because it's not deployed, maybe, or this
it
is just general
should
available things?
be deployed. Yeah, these are the things that were deployed, so you can see like it is running
Okay.
here. There we go. I can get to it here. Somehow it
Okay.
wasn't listed there. I'm gonna go here. You can see it is running. It does have this domain name, but it's
Hmm.
not. But the distribution is not working for some reason. All right.
That's okay.
Um, yeah,
Let's
that's
see.
it's fine. What I'm going to just show you instead is just like we're going to go here and we're
Okay.
going to see my Lambda here. This is my hello world function.
Okay.
I can actually
Do you
just
mind zooming that in too? Sorry.
yeah, it's zoomed. It's weirdly it is zoomed, but this is just really small.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Um,
Gotcha. No, cool.
so
That's
yeah, I'm just gonna this one. It doesn't take any arguments, so I can just kind of invoke it. It should work. We should actually see my um, oh wow, I really screwed something up.
is that when you cleared the? Well, no, you pulled back down all the Docker images.
I did. I did.
Do,
Hmm.
do you want to try a fresh project,
I
like
am gonna do that.
another Lambda?
I am gonna do that. I'm
Well,
gonna
on
end
okay,
everything here, and that
cool.
way we'll try. We're actually gonna try something slightly different because that
Okay,
way I can make sure that I'll show you the other demo, which is better anyway than this
yeah.
demo. This one was very simple.
Oh, no worries.
So
There's another question in the chat while you're
sure.
doing that. So excuse me. Ryan's asking, could this be used to spin up self-contained preview environments within a container service? I guess
Yes.
kind of like Netlify deploy previews or Vercel deploy
Yes, we
previews, I guess.
do. Yes, we have ephemeral environments that can do that. So like you could even have it so like when you do a PR, if you're doing something that's running on AWS,
Okay.
we can actually run spin up a quick an ephemeral environment so you can preview it, kind of like I was going to do here.
Okay.
So yes, yeah, totally, yes, you can do that. And there's other
Cool. Cool.
services that actually use local stack for doing that. I'm going to try and see if maybe I don't know what I did. Hopefully I didn't like
Yeah.
really mess things up, because I'll try and get this one running.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
this one is a little bit more fun because it's a more complete application.
Okay.
And I'm gonna just I'm gonna let it start going. It's gonna create a whole bunch of things. This one is set up a little bit different. That's why I'm using a shell script.
Okay.
Basically, you can see it's using our AWS local wrapper of the AWS CLI,
Okay.
and we're doing manually creating a whole bunch of resources. So like DynamoDB here, we're creating an SQS and we're Lambda functions, etc. Like this is all
Okay.
just using like if you know the AWS CLI, these are all kind of regular AWS CLI functions, just with this local added on. So
Okay.
I'm going to go through and
Um,
create a whole bunch of resources that sets up an
okay.
entire web application in
And I
theory.
guess, yeah, yeah. I guess like
Yeah.
we were looking at I mean, I know the other thing wasn't working, but the dashboard you were in, the web interface for local stack is that essentially all the things that are potentially available in local stack, and then you can also view like what's running or
Yes.
like their status and stuff. It's like this is a kind of like
Correct.
your diagnosis tool slash shopping.
Yeah. So I
Yeah.
can do that via the CLI if I want to, but I think it's way easier to like say I want to go like you can see now here's all my Lambda functions. I want to go into the get quiz function that
Okay.
actually like and I can invoke it or see the logs for it and things like that. So I can see
Okay.
I mean we've got if you're used to CloudWatch, you can see like all the CloudWatch logs um, for like being able to debug issues. And this web app,
Hmm.
just to be clear, you can see what it's connecting to is actually this URL is running on my machine. This
Yeah.
is
Okay.
not hosted in the cloud. We're not connected to the cloud. People tend to get confused because they get to the web app and they're like, this must so what now I'm in the cloud? And it's like, no, 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 you're not in the cloud.
Yeah.
You're still on your local machine.
Yeah.
But this web app is connecting via the URL for
Okay.
your basically local stack running on your machine. So let's see how badly Brian screwed things up. And hopefully we can open
Cool. Cool.
this URL and it'll work.
All
Ah, it
right.
worked.
Woo.
Yay! I don't
All
know
right.
what I
There we
did
go.
on the other one. Um, okay, so here we've got like a whole like quiz application where you can actually create new quizzes. You can build your own quiz and then send that kind of like a Quizlet or whatever. And you can send
Okay.
that to your friends via the scanning the QR code. I'm actually going to do something um, better just so you can see how this all runs. So we have
Okay.
something called Cloud Pods, and Cloud
Hmm.
Pods is basically a way of let's say you want to take a snapshot of the entire state of your application, and then I want to share it with um, a colleague. So like if you have a
Okay.
team, for instance, you might want to be able to want to easily set up everything via Cloud Pods. So I'm going to go ahead and go back to Cursor here. Um, Stack. We're going to restart local stack. So now that
Okay.
that app is shut down, right? But I'm actually going to go ahead and I need to remind myself what the Cloud Pod is. What it's called? It is called. Sorry
Oh
for
no, it's
going
all
through the
good.
instructions here myself. Okay.
Oh, there it
Local
is.
stack.
I just saw it. There it is. Pod load.
There we go. Yeah. So this is the command to like. I just need to know. I couldn't remember the name of the
Okay.
pod itself, which I should have been able to. It's very easy, very straightforward, but I didn't. Okay. So in this case, instead of creating all the resources manually through my deployment script, I've
Yeah.
actually created all the resources from a cloud pod. And then don't read all my messages. I'm gonna actually I need because I forget what the URL is. Boo, boo, boo. Don't read it. Here we go.
I can.
I forgot.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's okay. It's okay. It's nothing's private here.
Yeah.
I just forgot the URL that he said that I need to open here because it's slightly different. I probably could have just gotten it through the thing, but it's fine.
Okay.
So here we got the
And
same
is that a
quiz app.
public URL now, or
No,
is
it's not. It's not a
okay?
public
It's still
URL.
local. Okay. All right. Okay.
This is still local, still running on my local machine. It's just that particular deployment using that cloud pod has a defined CloudFront URL.
Okay.
So like so that's why it's using this this output, like this CloudFront your ID uh, for the CloudFront distribution. So,
Okay.
but you can see the differences here. Not only does the whole app run, but I've got a bunch of quizzes here.
Okay, because
Um,
you pre-populate. So like
yeah,
you said, the snapshot, so whatever the state of the database was at that point, all that
yeah,
stuff,
it's
that's what you get.
yeah,
Okay.
not just the resources, right? Like not just oh, there's a Lambda running, and there's you get even the data, the state for those things. So like, okay, so who was the first Marvel superhero to get their own comic book? Iron Man, Captain
Uh,
America, Spider Man, or Thor? I'm gonna say
I
Iron
f
Man.
I feel like
All right.
it's
Which DC superhero is also known as the Dark Knight? That one's easy. Come on.
yeah, yeah, Batman. Yeah, for sure.
Okay.
That's
All right. Marvel Universe, what is Wolverine's skeleton coated with?
Edmanium. Sorry, I'm a nerd. I was a big fan of Wolverine.
Who is Wonder Woman's primary antagonist in Greek mythology?
Ooh, that I don't know. I would guess
I think it's
Zeus,
Ares.
maybe? Okay.
I thought it was Ares, but I'm not. Which
There's too much
character from
pressure.
Marvel and DC is known for wielding a magical hammer that only the worthy can lift? That's an
Yeah.
easy one.
Yeah,
Thor.
exactly.
Okay, Smith. Boom. We
Okay.
scored. But okay, the point here is like isn't really obviously the quiz.
It did
Um,
render something. There's some image on the
yeah,
far right there, but yeah. Oh, there
yeah,
you go.
yeah,
Cool.
yeah. It was this image on the far right is literally our
Oh,
stream.
okay, it's our
Sorry.
stream. Okay, okay.
um, so yeah, we scored 110. How does that compare? I don't know. Are these
Yeah.
questions right? I don't really. Did we get them right? I think so.
We got most
Aries,
of my
maybe. I don't know if Aries is right,
the Wonder
but the
Woman
rest
one,
I know is
I
right.
don't know. Yeah, all the others are I'm pretty
Yeah.
confident.
Anyway,
Um,
but the point is like this entire thing isn't just like as you can see, it's using a whole host of services in here.
yeah.
Um, from from the it's got a whole these are all the different lambdas that these are written in Python, but these are all the different lambdas that run all the aspects of that application. You've got a DynamoDB database that keeps all the data for that. Um, you've got uh, You've got a front end that's lives in S3. That's where the web app itself lives.
Okay.
We've got we've got an SQS queue. Like we've even got SES integrated, which I'm not going to show off right now. Which SES is for like for sending emails and stuff like that. Like so,
Yeah.
it can actually email you the results of the quiz. All of
Okay.
that, every bit of that is running on my local machine.
Okay. And I guess
Yeah,
a question I have is so like when you started up the cloud pod, obviously it it had all the resources that you defined deployed in the pod. It had the snapshot of the data at that point. But as we were doing the quiz, like I'm assuming the quiz updates in the database or does it not? And so
correct.
like so that particular snapshot in that cloud pod would have modified data, but if you restarted it, it would reset to that snapshot or
Yeah, it's not storing the like I have to manually restore the snapshot if I want to save that data all
okay.
over again.
Yeah, okay, cool.
So like it basically the cloud pod is essentially like at this point in time, take the snapshot of all the services running inside my local stack, as well as any data, any state for those
Okay.
services, and take that snapshot. And then when I send that to somebody else to load it, or I try to load it again myself,
Yeah.
I can just it will give me right back to that. So if I were to rerun that cloud pod to like pull it back down, we'd end up
Mhm.
like we'd lose my quiz results basically.
Yeah, yeah.
You can
No,
see
okay, gotcha.
these are all the different pieces. We've got a step function going. We've got SQS, which is like a queue, right? A queuing system for like events and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Um, we've got S and S3 pipes, Lambda. I am is always there, right? We got event
Mhm.
bus, DynamoDB, CloudFront API gateway. All those pieces are running on my machine right now. Um,
Okay.
and to make that whole quiz work, right?
Yeah, that's
So
pretty cool. The one thing this makes me think of is like I've done a lot of end-to-end testing and I know like when I worked at Dev2, I set up Cypress there and there was a Rails backend. So,
mhm.
and it was deploying to Heroku, but regardless, I think the same thing applies. Um, I was looking at a way, like, the thing with, and the thing with unit tests is they run and there's no data. It's just like input in, always get whatever you're expecting. But with the end-to-end tests, you're changing the state of the application. And so like
Hmm.
the big thing we had to do was roll back any changes to the database. And I ended up finding this good solution that was in Rails land, but it basically wrapped it in a transaction so you roll back at the end of the test, and there was some trade-offs there, but in the context of like say we're doing end-to-end tests and we're using local stack, I could conceivably say like is it a cloud pod that we would use? So I could say like start my
Yeah,
end-to-end test, run the cloud pod. First test runs, obviously it changed stuff. I don't want that stuff changed to be in the next test because you don't want it to affect. So you can just say restart cloud pod with next test or like how.
yeah.
Okay.
Essentially, every time that test runs, it's going to spin up. It's going to look pull the like usually if you're integrating this in like say GitHub Actions. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing because
Yeah, yeah, for
um,
sure.
I think we can I can go back to the demo if we need to. But usually, like if you're doing those kind of end-to-end or integration tests that you want to pull that state in, yeah,
Yeah,
you do it in like say GitHub Actions would pull the actual image,
yeah.
right? For local stack, then you'd actually load the pod for all the services and state, run
Okay.
your tests, and then basically
Yeah.
everything in local stack is ephemeral. Like that's the kind of beauty of being local. Is
Yeah.
like as soon as I as soon as I stop that instance, there's no services running. Like there's nothing,
Yeah.
right? So you don't have to reload the pod because the GitHub Actions end
Okay, and it just
the
stops it.
instance.
Okay.
Yeah, it stops
Okay.
and it's gone, right? Like so nothing. And then the next time you run it again, it's all going to be starting back from that state that was in that cloud pod.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's even nicer because, like, I mean, at least speaking from the context of when I was at Dev 2, there was always like a test database that was up, you know what I mean? And
Yeah.
so, like, which is potentially a cost, right? So, like, it's kind of nice that you're just like up, do your thing, done, everything's
Yeah.
gone, you know? So,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, no,
Exactly.
that's really
And you
nice.
can do like you could do this. We're using Dynamo, but it could be like a RDS. Like do
Okay.
if you wanted to use like a relational database or something like that, that AWS supports, it's going to do
Yeah.
that there as well. So
Yeah.
so
No,
yeah,
that's
that's
cool.
so yeah, for testing that's great. The Cloud Pods, by the way, I should be clear, is a paid feature. It's not a free feature. So obviously
Yeah.
that but if you are doing if you do have those, like if another option like thing people use it for is like if you have a team, you just
Hmm.
want them all to be able to set up. Here's what our setup is, so you can build and test locally.
Yeah.
Just here's the cloud pod that basically gets you our entire AWS setup on your local machine,
Okay. Yeah.
ready to go. Our application's ready. Now you just got to do is start coding, right?
Yeah.
Um,
And that's really nice, like from having been somebody who's done a lot of front end, like I've done back end too, but like it's kind of nice where the back end team could just say like, here's the API we agreed on, boom, here you go, just keep doing what you're doing, and just when you need to hit
yeah,
the API, use that. So no, that's pretty nice. and
yeah,
and it's your point about cloud pods being a paid feature. I don't think that's a bad thing. All the things you mentioned before, like setting up and tearing it down, not worrying about wasted resources just sitting there, but also just the time factor. Like like it's a real thing when devs are just sitting there. You're literally burning salaries.
I
so
know.
and so
Yeah.
and it's
I mean,
convenient
unless they
too.
like that, if they want to go get a coffee, they like. But if I use this, then when am I going to go get my coffee?
Yeah, yeah. It's like that old XKCD compiling. Yeah,
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
But yeah, a lot of that stuff you obviously can do with the free and open source version. So just to be clear,
yeah.
there is there's quite a bit you can do. I did show a little bit here and there that would be fall under the paid version, but the free and open source version
Yeah.
still get you a pretty long way, especially if you want just like the local development environment,
Mhm.
um, which is, it's really a lot nicer, in my opinion, to have to like to just build and test this stuff locally without ever having to
Yeah.
worry. And never mind, like one of my favorite uses for it is, I mean, you said you don't know AWS, but like, I mean, if you want to learn AWS, right? Like you're
Yeah.
gonna go set up an account, start spinning up stuff. You don't even know what you're spinning up. You don't even know how much it costs. You
Yeah.
know, you know what I mean? Like I know, for instance, when I was learning Azure, I for years I was sending Azure like $6, $7 a month for something
Mhm.
I could not figure out what the hell was still running. What's running? I don't know. And one day, once I remember one Saturday, I'm like, I am determined to sit down and figure out what is it that's running.
Yeah, yeah.
And I didn't know what I was doing. And so like when I had spun up something originally, I was like, I spun up I think it was a database.
Okay.
But by default, there was like an additional service that would, if you didn't specify not to turn it on, it would turn on, and
Okay,
that
just
that charged you. Uh, I don't remember the exact details, but I was like, okay,
okay.
that's
Yeah.
But point is, if you want to learn without the risk, I don't have to worry that I'm going to spin something up, or I don't
Yeah.
have to worry that I'm on a shared environment. I'm gonna um, Oop, sorry, video is freezing a little bit.
Oh,
I don't
okay.
have to worry that I'm on a shared environment. I'm going to screw up something for anybody else. That to me is like really, really, um,
Yeah.
really big. Yeah,
No, definitely. I was actually gonna ask you that, like, does it, could you learn AWS just by using local stack or even just
yeah,
build, yeah, and it makes sense. And like, and I guess depending on how your team is structured, not everybody's doing deployments necessarily. So like it makes
yeah,
sense as well in that regard. And yeah, Linda
yeah.
in the
Right.
chat, I shared this on the big screen, but
Hey, Linda.
yeah, Linda says, yeah, that's a big thing that stops me from trying out a lot of servers is not knowing if and when I'll hit a cost. Which it's
Yes.
valid. It's one thing when it's like a couple bucks, like you were saying, like your mysterious $7 thing, but it's another thing if like I see it on socials all the time. Oh, I got charged for X thousand of dollars. And I think a lot of times they're like, it's cool, we'll take care of it. But like obviously there's cases where they don't, I guess, and
Yeah.
aside from feeling silly about it, like that's like potentially big costs. So it's yeah,
Yeah.
I think I
Especially
might
if you're
actually
learning.
take this approach to learning AWS because and I actually have to do there's some demos I need to do for work to set up like I have to set up I think EKS with Pomerium and stuff. So this would actually be a viable way to just even mess around with it to just see at least.
Yeah, I was curious. Like, if there might be a way. Like, I'd love to investigate with you further, like how we connect Pomerium to, if somebody wants to be able to test that stuff and test
Yeah.
connecting Pomerium to a local resource instead of the real resource.
Yeah. Well, I think the way, I mean, like, obviously, we're talking about local stack today, but like with Pomerium, it's like you can run it locally, like with local certificates, and you can run it. There's different ways you can run it, but like easy way is just Docker compose, get a bunch of things running. But you typically have like on the Pomerium side of things, you would have because it's a proxy part of it, so like you would define whatever your actual URLs you want to hit are, and those could just point to like whatever the local stack internal app URLs are like. So like your CloudFront URLs that you were talking about before, probably just pop them in there. Maybe I don't know, it'd be interesting to see.
Yeah,
But I think that's probably how I would do it based on what you've shown me so far. Because at the end of the
yeah,
day, it's really just route goes from here. I mean, there's other pieces to it, but the routing part is literally like go from here to here if you pass the policy and you're logged in. So I feel like it actually be interesting to do. Actually, it'd probably be a good guide to make because like part of what I'm doing is making guides as well. So like it'd probably be interesting to do a local stack Pomerium guide. So I'll
yeah. I know somebody who might help you with that if you
yeah,
decide
yeah.
to
If
do
if you know, just let me know. But yeah, no,
Yeah,
that'd be cool to do actually. We could maybe do that on another stream another time.
yeah, absolutely.
But but yeah, so I guess to that point too, it's like so like you have like all these local URLs and stuff. So like basically everything I guess not like Pomeran, but if you wanted to wire it up to something else, it's the same kind of idea. Like if I was I guess you could well, you'd have to be running everything locally. It's like you can't put something in the cloud and then have it talk to your local really, unless you did like I don't know,
You
like I know
can. I
like
mean, the web app is talking to my local, and
oh
we
yeah,
do
that's
have
true.
like an open API spec as well, because you can
Okay.
like actually speak to LocalStack via our API and get it, do some
Oh,
of the
okay.
stuff like querying and things like that. See what services are running, get
Okay.
logs and things like that through the API.
Okay.
As long as it's running, right? Like so that
Yeah,
web
yeah,
app
yeah.
like checks, oh hey, I pinged that port 456 on 4566 on that um URL, and like if
Okay.
it's there, yeah, okay, it's running locally. I can now communicate with it.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, because like I've done for other things like because I've been giving this talk on GitHub Copilot extensions, but I never deploy the actual extension, like the web part of it. So just because
mm,
it's like it's a demo during the talk, but to to deploy a GitHub extension, you have to have a GitHub app that hits a publicly accessible URL. So I just because I'm in VS Code, I just use their port forwarding to do that. But I'm always running local when I do the talk and give the demo. So it's like you don't have to use that feature in VS Code. There's like Cloudflare or there's like ngrok as well, but I just use that
yeah,
because
I've done that with ngrok, yeah. Yeah.
yeah. But yeah, no, this is cool. So I guess like if people, I because it's open source, I'm curious from like a community aspect. Do you have a lot of external contributors? Like, hey, I'd love to add this to it, or is it less so that, or more like filing
Yeah,
bugs, or
it's more filing issues and things like that. If you
okay,
go to like github.com/localstack/localstack, that's the main project.
okay,
And that um and you can actually pull the open source version from if you want to pull the open source version. If you go to the website, it's gonna try and get you to do a trial,
yeah,
which would still dump you in a free account eventually anyway. So it's not
okay,
a huge deal. But like you can but if you want, we don't have a lot of external contributors. There have been some.
okay.
As you can imagine, it's not really the easiest like
Yeah,
project to
might
contribute
not be
to.
as approachable potentially. Yeah, I guess so.
Yes.
Yeah, that's
So,
true.
yeah, so like most of the development is done by us. There have been occasional like contributions as well.
Okay, yeah,
So yeah, it's one of those like it's open source, but most people are not going to want to dig into the code themselves, but
yeah,
it is open source.
yeah,
And that obviously is for what we call like the community image. The
yeah,
pro image that has the extra 70 some odd services,
yeah.
that's not open source.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. And it's like, I mean, just in like the dev tooling in space in general, that at least I've noticed since at least the pandemic or like right at the beginning of the pandemic, there's a lot of dev tools that have kind of gone the open source route and then try to figure out, how do I make money? Like it's a
Yeah.
common problem, but it sounds like your team's nailed that down, and it's like a- and I don't know, I mean I'm a big fan of open source, so like I think it's a good thing, and it's also just putting it out there. Like even though you said it might not be super approachable as a project, it's still out there. So like if people find issues, like they can potentially fix it or file it, like you said. But
Yeah.
I still think it's a great way to give exposure to your project. Like I mean, we're open core as well, and like I get it. Like I love open source, but I also understand at the end of the day, a company needs to make money. So you do have enterprise offerings or paid versions for obvious reasons. But I I think it's and I saw this at Not Lo-Fi too, but like you end up with this. I don't know how it is where you're at, but it's you have the the bottom up, but also top down happening in terms of people that
Yeah.
are using the product. And I know like even some of our clients at Pomerium, it's like they use the open source version. They were doing like home labs and stuff. They loved the product, and then they became an engineering leader somewhere, and they're like, we should use this, and then they're on enterprise now. And I don't know if you've seen that kind of like
Yeah.
adoption.
Yeah. I mean, it's one of the weird things about working for LocalStack is that we are a small startup. We just closed Series A in like November,
Okay.
right? Um, and so we're growing, but like relatively early stage. But you go to places like we go to reInvent, and everybody's like, "Oh yeah, I love LocalStack. I know local."
Yeah.
Everywhere I go, literally, everybody's like, "Oh, I know LocalStack. Yeah, I've used LocalStack, for
Yeah.
years." And or
That's awesome.
so so it's weird because there's so many users of the open source version. It's been around for
Mhm.
so long that like the name recognition is already pretty high,
Yeah.
and lots of people really love it. From a business standpoint, I talk to this like I'm like, oh yeah, you love it. Do you pay for it? They're like, oh no, I haven't. Do you have? They will even be like, you have a paid version? I'm like, oh, okay, got
Yeah,
my work
so
cut
so
out for
maybe
me.
there's awareness around the paid version, I
Yeah,
guess,
yeah,
potentially.
yeah.
But
So
but regardless, it's still good that like, kind of word of mouth because of open source, people know the product. So it's like that actually happened to us at KubeCon. We were at KubeCon London a couple weeks ago, and we were, we obviously have some customers and we have like the open source version, but excuse me, as we were talking to a lot of people there, a lot of Europeans, obviously, because it's in London, and like there was tons of Europeans that are like they were just a big fan of like just the fact that it was open source and just like open core, and like also it was like, our particular things on premise, but it just to your point about like all these people knew about local stack, and then like we didn't know all these open source people knew about us, and we like just kind of discovered it at KubeCon. But anyways,
yeah,
uh,
it's really odd. It's a good feeling when you get that, right?
yeah, totally, totally. I know you got a hard stop soon, so I just want to say like this is super cool hanging out, and I know the first demo did work out, but like the second one did, and we did the quiz. I think we got like only one question wrong potentially, but
Yeah, yeah.
um,
It also scores you on how quickly, and we were a little slow, so like,
okay,
yeah, we'll have to
yeah.
try it again.
Yeah, but no, like it definitely demoed like the power of having all this just running locally without having to spin up all these services. And I think I'll definitely take you up on it another time when you got some free time to see if we could just get something up and running with Pomerium, and it'd be fun to just see, because I think that would be a good use case for people to actually work on their project if they happen to be using Pomerium. So
Yeah,
um,
exactly, right? And
yeah,
if they're using Premium and they're using AWS, perfect fit. So
yeah.
happy to collaborate on that. That would be great.
Yeah, cool, cool.
Um,
I just shared the link for LocalStack again, if anybody wants to check that out. And yeah, thanks again, Brian. I know you got to hop off, but it's great hanging today, and I'll see you next week because we've got our virtual coffee conference. Is it
Yeah,
next week
although
or?
I'll be behind the scenes. I'm not actually like on screen at all. I will be helping manage things behind the scenes, but yes, I'm really excited about that. And you're speaking, so a ton
Yeah,
of other great people. So it's gonna be a lot of fun. Folks
yeah,
who want to check it out, go to cfe.dev and you'll see it listed on our upcoming events.
yeah.
Um,
I'll just go
yeah,
ahead and
yeah.
drop that. But yeah,
So
cool, cool. Well, thanks again, man.
awesome.
And everybody else, thanks again for hanging. We'll see you in the next one. Can't remember. It's in a couple weeks. We're going to be hanging with Chad Whitaker, who runs open source over at Century. So looking forward to that
Nice.
conversation. And yeah, take care, everybody. And Brian, if you don't mind hanging on for 1 second, and take care, everybody.
Yeah. Bye. Thanks for having